Okay, welcome to another episode of the Jewelry Resellers Podcast. I am your jewelry reselling bestie. My name is Desiree. And what I try to do with this podcast is to bring you information, resources, ideas, maybe even feedback on things you can do to make more money as a jewelry reseller. So today's topic is one that I think a lot of us have dealt with at some point or another as it relates to being a jewelry reseller. And that topic is whether or not we should clean, polish, maybe even repair our jewelry before selling it. Now, like I said, there's a lot of mixed opinions about this, but today I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of cleaning jewelry, antique, vintage, and it doesn't really only have to be antique or vintage jewelry, but this is something that I think a lot of people question because they I don't know if worry is the right word, but they think about, can I make more money if I clean this piece before I list it, or should I leave it alone, or what should I do? All right, so we're going to talk about that today. But before we get started with that, I like to always remind you to make sure that you join our newsletter, because when you do, I'm going to send you a list of the 20 best-selling vintage jewelry brands that I believe all resellers should know about. And if you're just getting started on this business path or this business journey, it will be a very helpful list for you. And even if you've been doing this for a while, maybe you might want to check out the list and make sure you're not missing anything. Now, the list I created from my own experience as well as my own research. So, like I said, I want to send that to you for free. It's an instant download. All you have to do is head on over to jewelryresellerspodcast.com. And if you are watching this on YouTube, I will have a link in the description. Or if you are listening to the audio version of this episode, I will have a link in the show notes. All right. Let me see. Is there anything else I need to remind you of? Make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you follow if you are listening to the podcast. And I would love it if you left a review, at least if you found this podcast helpful in any way. I would love for you to leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really anywhere, because that really does help me and it helps people find the podcast who may be looking for this information, you know, because that's what it's all about. It's me trying to help you make more money as a jewelry reseller. All right, so I will be referring back and forth to my notes as I always do, because there's a lot to talk about today. All right. And I don't want to forget anything. And I want to make sure I touch on all the points that I believe are important as it relates to this topic. So remember, we're talking about, do we want to clean or polish or repair the jewelry pieces that we find while we're outsourcing? Do we want to take that extra step? Is it going to matter as it relates to the return on how much we can sell the piece for? Will it increase the value? Will it decrease the value depending on, the particular piece? All right, so let's go ahead and start with that. All right, so when we consider whether or not to clean antique or vintage or any type of pre-owned jewelry, before selling it, we want to think about why. And if you're just getting started, you may not necessarily have a good idea about jewelry in general, so you don't know if you should do this or maybe not, or maybe sell it as is. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat that all of those approaches are correct. There's not really a right or wrong way to do this. However, we do want to take into consideration, some of the things that may make a difference and that may matter to the buyer when we're trying to sell these pieces. Okay, so let's talk about the pros. That's really where I want to start. I want to talk about the good things or the positive reasons why we may want to consider cleaning a jewelry piece before we list it. All right, so the first pro I wrote down is the enhanced beauty or aesthetic appeal of the piece. Now, we all can agree that cleaning a jewelry piece will make it look better, right? So, it's not going to take anything away from it necessarily. Cleaning can restore the jewelry's original shine and beauty, making it more visually appealing to potential buyers. And a clean piece can stand out more and attract buyers who prefer the look of flawless, pristine jewelry. Now, I am one of those people who likes my jewelry to be shiny and sparkly. I don't like any noticeable flaws, but that's me. I know not everybody has that same opinion. But this is one of the reasons where I do think that cleaning the piece ahead of time could add value and could attract more buyers, like we said. All right, number two, the second pro that I'd like to share with you is increased perceived value. Now, I have had this experience many times as a jewelry reseller. Sometimes you'll find pieces that somebody spilled something on, or maybe they've just been thrown in a box and they're covered in dirt, dust, or who knows what. And all you got to do is clean them up a little bit and they look amazing, right? And it doesn't really take away anything from the piece. So, clean jewelry often does look more valuable, which can justify a higher selling price. Buyers may perceive a well maintained piece as higher quality and more desirable. So, I do find this to be true because buyers look at jewelry and they say, oh, the previous owner really took good care of these pieces. And so that tells me that they're worth maintaining, they're worth taking care of. So it's all about, that perceived value for the buyer and also what people think is, I guess, what people think is worth putting effort into. Okay. All right. The pro number three of cleaning the jewelry ahead of time is better photographs. Of course, I think this is an obvious one. Clean jewelry photographs better, which can improve the quality of your online listings. Clear, attractive photos are crucial for selling jewelry online, like we talk about. And they help attract buyers and give a better representation of the jewelry. All right, so obviously a clean piece of jewelry is going to photograph or even video better because people can see all the details. And I think that's definitely a strong selling point that we want to keep in mind. All right, number four is customer satisfaction. Again, this is all about the buyer experience. We want to make sure that the buyer actually, when they receive the piece in the mail or when they buy it in person, whatever, that they're happy and they're looking at something that they believe they made a good purchase on. Okay, so customers generally prefer receiving clean, polished jewelry items. Clean jewelry can lead to a higher customer satisfaction rate, positive reviews, and of course, repeat business, which that's always good, right? We always want customers coming back. All right, so those are the things that I believe where it would help to clean the jewelry piece ahead of time. But let's talk about some of the reasons why we may not want to do this. Okay. Now, this is going to vary, excuse me, from piece to piece. And it's going to vary depending on what type of jewelry that you are sourcing, too. Okay. So, the first con as it relates to cleaning jewelry, antique, vintage, or otherwise, is the risk of damaging the piece. Now, this is a big one. And in general, this is one of the reasons why I do not clean or polish the jewelry that I find. Now, granted, if there's just a little surface dirt, sure, I may wipe that off. But for the most part, I really don't take the time to really deep clean jewelry pieces because I am afraid that I might damage it. Maybe I might do something that I'm not supposed to do. So you have to be very, very careful. Cleaning vintage and antique jewelry can be risky, especially if the pieces are delicate or they have intricate details. Improper cleaning techniques or harsh chemicals can damage the jewelry, reducing its value. And I just want to say I've had this happen on more than one occasion where I have tried to clean something or repair something and I just ended up making it worse. I know in one particular case, it looked like the jewelry had like a kink in it. So I tried to straighten it out and I ended up breaking it. And of course, it was something that someone already paid for. And so, anyway, I had to message her, give her a refund. Luckily, she was very understanding about it. But you just don't want to find yourself in those types of situations. And even though that wasn't necessarily cleaning, cleaning, no, that wasn't necessarily cleaning the piece. It was something I shouldn't have done. I shouldn't have messed with it. All right, so that's the first con, risk of damage. Number two, loss of patina and historical value. Now, surprisingly, a lot of people do like patina and maybe a little age and wear on particular jewelry pieces. And some people don't want you to clean it because they either want to clean it themselves or they want to preserve the integrity of the piece. All right, so many collectors and buyers appreciate the natural patina and signs of age on vintage and antique jewelry. Now, these contribute to the piece's history and, in some cases, its authenticity. Cleaning can remove this patina, potentially reducing the piece's appeal to certain buyers and or collectors. So this is something we definitely want to keep in mind. We don't want to disrupt, like I said, the integrity of the piece. So be very, very careful, right? And this is going to probably be a decision you make on a piece by piece basis. I don't think you can just say, well, don't ever clean pieces that have patina on them. But again, you know, how much knowledge do you know and how educated are you on that particular type of jewelry or that particular jewelry piece? All right. The other aspect too is you can actually take some jewelry pieces into a jewelry store, and a lot of jewelers will clean jewelry for you. So that's an option too. However, do you want to invest in that up front, especially when you may not know how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, and if you can trust that the jeweler won't damage the piece? Okay, but that is a con. Professional cleaning costs, professional cleaning services can be expensive. For resellers operating on a tight budget, the cost of professional cleaning might not be justified by the potential increase in selling price. So, this is something to keep in mind. I just wanted to make sure my microphone was still on. But this is something to remember, because we don't want to add additional costs to um, our business, especially if this is just like one piece. Or what if you want to have 10 pieces cleaned? Okay, so think about this, because even though a jeweler may know a little bit more or a lot more than you do you want to invest that cost in having that piece professionally cleaned? All right, and my last con as it relates to cleaning and or polishing jewelry as a reseller, is the time and effort it may take. Now, in the beginning, I I didn't like deep clean a lot of jewelry pieces, but I did. I like if they were in a big bulk lot, sometimes they just looked kind of dingy, and so I would kind of soak them in like some soapy water and then delicately swish them around, very carefully. I don't know. I don't do that anymore because of the time it takes. And then, waiting for the pieces to dry and making sure water's not getting where it's not supposed to be. So cleaning jewelry can be a time consuming thing, especially if you have a large inventory, if you have a lot of pieces. The effort involved in cleaning each piece may not always result in a equal or greater return in the value of the piece or in a quicker sale. It may not necessarily matter. All right, so these are some things you want to think about. Yes, there are some good points as it relates to cleaning jewelry, but there's also some things that may not necessarily be good and may not make it worth it for your time and your energy devoted to doing that, right? Because you could take that same time and maybe find or source some more jewelry. Maybe you can take better photos. Maybe you can rewrite better listings. There's always something to do as it relates to our business and jewelry and managing and organizing and all those things. Okay, so now that we've talked about the pros and the cons of cleaning jewelry, what I want to get into next are just some general cleaning and care tips, because that's another thing that not only resellers have asked me about, but I've also had my customers and my buyers ask me, oh, how do I take care of this piece? Or how do I clean this piece? What should I do? What should I avoid? Those types of things. And if you are knowledgeable about some basic jewelry care tips, I think it will do a lot to help your buyers trust you, as well as come back and shop from you again. Because, when people spend money on jewelry, especially, when they're spending a lot, they want to preserve the beauty of those pieces. And we want to make sure that we can help them do that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some general cleaning tips for antique and vintage jewelry, or any type of pre-owned or estate jewelry. Okay, so here's some things we want to think about as it relates to that. So number one, you want to know your materials. You want to know what the jewelry is made of, because you're going to clean a 14 karat gold necklace very differently than you are going to clean a rhinestone necklace. Okay, so you want to make sure that you understand the materials that are involved in that particular jewelry piece. And then you want to have a good understanding of what works and what doesn't work when it comes to cleaning, polishing, and maintaining those types of jewelry pieces. All right, so identify the materials used in your jewelry. Things like gold, silver, platinum, gemstones, pearls, rhinestones, all of those things, as different materials, and they do require different cleaning methods. And you want to be aware of that, okay? And so then you want to share that with your buyer as well. Just say, hey, this pearl necklace, you're going to handle that and care for that a little bit differently than you are this 14 karat gold necklace. All right. And believe it or not, some buyers don't know. So we don't want them to go ahead and do something, and then, they message you a month later saying, oh my gosh, my jewelry fell apart or something happened, and then they want a refund or something like that. So educating your buyer on some basic things like this is going to be helpful for both you and them. All right, number two, we want to assess the condition of the jewelry piece, because sometimes you'll come across something that may have an issue and you may not want to clean it. You may not want to risk that. Okay, so carefully examine the jewelry for any damage, loose stones, or fragile areas before cleaning. If the piece is particularly delicate, you may want to tell the buyer to get it professionally cleaned. Because I would hate for someone to try and do something and then they end up damaging the piece, and then it's a miserable experience. So be very, very careful, when you are looking over the piece. And this is even before you list it, because if something's, amiss, or if there's a loose stone, or there's a crack in something, or there's, the clasp is not quite, as tight as it should be, you may not even want to list that, or you may want to list it, stating whatever type of flaw or something is on it, because there are some people who do like to repair jewelry, and they don't mind buying something that is broken or has an issue. But you just want to make sure that you know this before you actually list it, because you don't want any surprises later on, either, from you or from the buyer saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know it had this, or it was so dirty, or, whatever they say. All right, so make sure you examine the condition of the piece before you make the decision or the determination of whether or not you want to clean, repair, or polish. All right, and number 3, you want to be very gentle. We talked about this earlier. Avoid harsh chemicals and abrasive materials. If you are going to use soap, use a very mild soap and not very much of it. I like to use Dawn dish soap and like literally just a drop. I don't squirt a whole bunch in there, but in a bowl of water, if I am going to clean that way, just a drop of Dawn dish soap is more than enough, because you don't want a bunch of like suds and soap kind of getting in between like the little areas in the jewelry. All right, because you don't want to have to like rinse it and put it under what, well, I guess depending on what it is. But like I said, you don't need very much. All right, so you want to use mild soap, warm water, and a soft brush or a cloth if you are going to do any type of scrubbing or anything like that. All right, so let's talk about the cleaning methods for the different materials. And what I will do is, I just thought about this now, I will copy and paste this in the show notes on the website, jewelryresellerspodcast.com. And I think this is episode number 65, I will list this on the website. So that way, if you would like to have a copy of this list, you can, just copy it from there. Because I know if you're listening to this or just watching this, it may be hard to write all this down and it may be hard to remember it. Okay. All right. So if you're cleaning gold and platinum, this is where you're going to use the mild soap and water, like I talked about. Literally a drop of Dawn dishwashing soap in a bowl of warm water. And you just have to kind of swish the piece in there. You don't really need to soak it very long. What I like to do is put it in there, swish it around, let it sit for a few minutes if it's something really grimy. But if it's not that dirty, sometimes you can just dip it in there and then just kind of wipe it dry, and that will bring the shine back to the piece. All right. You may want to use like a soft toothbrush or a soft cloth to clean in any of the crevices or any of the links or something like that. And then, of course, you're going to rinse very carefully. Be careful. What I like to do when I'm washing jewelry in the sink is I take a washcloth, a wet washcloth, and I put that over the drain, because God forbid if you drop the piece, you don't want it falling in the drain or having it get caught in the drain. So make sure you put a towel or something over the drain before you handle the jewelry so nothing falls in the drain. Okay. Because I've heard stories of that happening and I don't want that to happen. You don't want to lose a piece, down the drain when you're just trying to clean it. All right, let's talk about silver next. Now, silver can be a little bit tricky. I've heard a lot of different ways of cleaning silver. I use a silver polishing cloth, and you can buy these. I've even seen them at Walmart. It's just like a soft cloth, and it says they make them for silver and gold. I think I have both. But I just use a polishing cloth, and you don't have to get it wet or anything. But you can gently remove any tarnish on the silver, but you want to make sure you're not too harsh with it because it will scratch depending on what type of cloth you're using. You don't want to scratch the piece or cause any damage, because sometimes silver is very, very soft. The other trick I've heard a lot of people do is the baking soda with foil. I think you put a piece of foil in a bowl of water with you put foil on the bottom and then baking soda and water, and then you put your silver jewelry in there. I've never done that method, but I have heard people doing that, and I've heard that it cleans it really well. I've also heard things where people use ketchup to clean silver. I've never done that, so I don't know. But these are, methods you can probably research online or maybe on YouTube or something like that. But I've only done the silver polishing cloth with my pieces, my personal jewelry pieces, and I've had really good luck with that. And so because it's worked for me, I'm not really interested in trying anything else because I don't want to risk it. All right, but there is also a baking soda paste, which I found online, and that is mix baking soda with a small amount of water to form a paste. Apply it with a soft cloth and gently rub and rinse off with water, and then dry it with the soft cloth. All right, so I guess baking soda is okay. Like I said, I've never done it, but I have heard people, and like I said, I've mentioned, a couple of other methods where people say that this works really well for silver jewelry. All right, let's move on to gemstones. All right, so you want to use a soft brush and a mild soap. Now, again, it depends on the setting too, because I'm very particular about using water and soap in certain types of settings as it relates to the jewelry, like especially rhinestones, especially if there's prongs. Sometimes you have to be careful. You don't want anything getting underneath there. So now they do make jewelry cleaners, but I talked to two different people at the Antique Jewelry and Watch show a few weeks ago, and they both told me that you should not use those harsh cleaners. Um, it's like a dip, and it's like a liquid in a jar, and it comes with a little screen, and you put your jewelry in there and you dip it in there. I have heard that those can cause a lot of damage. Now, again, you can use at your own risk. You don't have to listen to what I say, but just be very, very careful with some of those, because you don't want to ruin your piece or cause something to get loose or anything like that, or liquid to kind of get underneath some of the gemstones. Now, again, it depends on the setting, it depends on the piece, and it depends on the gemstone, right? So if you have something that you're really not sure about, I would definitely do some research. Like I said, you can go on Google, maybe YouTube, or maybe even ask a professional jeweler. Next time you're out and about, maybe you can stop in a jewelry store and just say, hey, you know, how do I clean this piece? And maybe you'll get some information that way too. But you want to be very, very careful, because I did write avoid soaking gemstones, as some stones can be porous and can absorb water. Again, this is going to be on a piece by piece basis. All right. So just be very aware of that. All right, next on my list, I do have pearls. Now, remember, I did an episode with Matt, my favorite pearl expert, and he shared some tips about how to care for, how to maintain, and how to clean your pearls. So, you should never soak pearls in water. Don't do that, and try not to get them wet. Don't wear them in the shower. Don't wear them when you're swimming. If you're spraying on perfume, fragrance, whatever, do that first and then put your pearl jewelry on, because you want to protect them from moisture. All right, the best way to clean pearls, according to Matt, is to just kind of wipe them gently. And you don't have to do anything, major as it relates to cleaning them, unless something spills on it, of course. But you really just need to wipe them with a soft cloth, and that's pretty much it. All right. Next I have on my list is enamel jewelry. And the reason why I put this on my list is because I've had so many people in my live shows ask about cleaning and caring for enamel jewelry. And surprisingly, it's one of the more durable jewelry pieces out there. So you don't have to do a whole lot. Literally, you can just wipe it down with a soft cloth. I've even run it under the water faucet, just plain water, no soap. And sometimes that's enough to get off any grime or whatever may be on there. So, the nice thing about enamel jewelry is that it's pretty durable, and it doesn't take a whole lot to keep it looking really, bright, sparkly, and clean. All right. Oh, but you do want to avoid soaking the pieces long term, and any type of harsh scrubbing, because that could lift the enamel on some pieces. So be very, very careful with that. Okay. Next. Now, here's one that may cause a lot of controversy, and that is using ultrasonic cleaners. Now, this can be a good thing, but in some cases, it can be too harsh or too much, especially for older antique and vintage pieces. Okay, so I'm not saying don't ever use an ultrasonic cleaner, not at all. But I'm also saying please make sure you evaluate the piece before you throw it into your ultrasonic cleaner, because some of these antique jewelry pieces will not be able to tolerate that. It's just too much. And you don't want to damage the piece, right? Especially if it is something really, really old. Okay, so just be very, very careful. I think ultrasonic cleaners are great. I've had some pieces that come out looking amazing, even things that were not expensive, like newer jewelry pieces. And so, again, just make sure that you're paying attention to exactly what it is that you have, and please do not do not damage your piece unintentionally. All right. The other thing I want to remind you of is make sure that you allow the piece to dry completely. You don't want to um, put any jewelry in a plastic bag or in a jewelry box or something if it's still wet. All right. So, what I have seen people do is they will lay their jewelry out like on a towel or something like that. And then they will just take their blow dryer and blow dry it, make sure it's dry, and then flip the piece over if you can, and then blow dry the back side, and that will make sure that it is thoroughly dry, especially in some of those little crevices and tiny areas. So make sure that the jewelry is thoroughly dry before you put it into storage, however you're going to do that. All right, and that brings me to my next point, which is storage. And I wrote down store each piece separately in a soft pouch or a lined jewelry box to avoid scratches and, in some cases, tarnish. Use anti tarnish strips or pouches for silver pieces. Now, I don't do that. I know some people do. Again, it depends on the type of jewelry piece, um, and whether or not you want to invest in that. So again, this is all going to be your call. What works for you, what doesn't. I've never used those anti-tarnish strips, but I do know people that do. So, and I think that probably applies more towards newer pieces of jewelry, newer silver. But some of the older pieces, I don't bother with that. And then I have consult a professional. Again, this may be something you want to invest in, it might not be. But remember, that's always an option too. If you have any doubt or if you have any anxiety about cleaning a piece, because I know how overwhelming it could be when you're trying to figure out, should I or should I not? Is it worth the cost? Is it worth the time? Okay, so you can always contact a professional jewelry cleaner if you have any questions or doubts or concerns. And then finally, regular maintenance. Okay, so if you are storing your jewelry, properly, and you are focused on taking really good care of your jewelry pieces, or in our cases, maybe our jewelry inventory, you may not have to do a whole lot of maintenance as it relates to that. You may not have to um, constantly tend to it or anything like that. But you do want to regularly clean and inspect your jewelry to keep it in very good condition and to be aware of any potential issues early on, right? Like you may notice a stone is loose and then you can either get it fixed or replaced or whatever the case may be. So cleaning antique and vintage jewelry requires patience and attention to detail. By using very gentle methods and the appropriate materials, you can maintain the beauty and integrity of your jewelry pieces. Always prioritize the preservation of the jewelry's original state, and again, consult a professional when necessary. All right, so I want to know your thoughts and I want to know your opinion and get some of your feedback. Do you clean your jewelry pieces prior to listing them? Because the other thing you'll come across is that some buyers will actually ask you to clean their jewelry before sending it out. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to make the decision about ahead of time if that's something you're comfortable doing, or if it's maybe an additional service you might want to offer, in relation to your jewelry business, because there are people that do that too, where they are not only sellers, but they are also people who repair and clean jewelry as well. And that's another way you can maybe add some additional services or additional streams of income to your current jewelry reselling business. Okay, so like I said, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions about this topic. And if there's something I may have missed, maybe you want to let me know, and then I can do a follow up or a part two, and we can do some research or figure something out together. Because I don't know everything about everything as it relates to this, but I'm not afraid to do some research, and I'm not afraid to reach out to someone who I may know has more knowledge or experience with this, and maybe we can bring them onto the podcast so they can help us find the answers that we're looking for. Okay, so again, if you are not signed up to the newsletter, you want to make sure you join. You can find all of that information on the website, which is jewelryresellerspodcast.com. And make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hopefully, that's where you're watching this right now. And I am doing more face to camera podcast, because a lot of you told me that you do like this format. So I'll kind of, I'll bounce back and forth between this and audio only. So, but this does require a little bit more setup. So, I don't know if I'll do this all the time, but I will make an effort to do it more. So, all right. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And like I said, if you have any questions or any ideas for topics for future episodes, please reach out to me, because I would love to know what you think. All right. Thanks so much for watching, and I will check in with you again really soon.